we can introduce the first panel, policy perspective, opportunities, trends, and challenges in the field of cultural heritage. With us as moderator, we have our colleague Marco Ferrazzani, who is the head of Legal Service Department, to make us the honor to be the moderator. Marco, welcome, and I leave the floor to you to introduce your section.
Thank you, Donatella. Good morning to everybody. I'm really pleased to hear UNESCO and our Director General introducing the day. We have been having a long and fruitful cooperation, starting with the agreement many years ago, and this has brought fruit. And we have also an exciting panel this morning. I will introduce each of the panelists and then ask them a starting question for each of them one by one. And then later, after their presentations, we'll have a round of question and answers. So I invite all attendees also to, as we go, if they wish to ask questions or comments, put it in the chat on the side. I'll take note and then we'll collect them for the later question. Our first speaker panelist this morning is Grady, who is a principal officer with DG Education Culture of the European Commission. Since May 2016, Anne has been working as a content national expert with the Cultural Policy Unit of DG of the Commission in Brussels, promoting both intangible and tangible cultural heritage of Europe. Before joining the Commission, she was a senior manager with the National Museum of Ireland. She was also a member of the expert group on digitization and digital preservation, and a member of both the UK and USA Overseas Marking Initiative Working Group. Anne introduced a number of initiatives in Ireland, notably the National Heritage Fund and the Heritage Week. Anne has qualification in a number of areas, including history, marketing, education, strategic management, and corporate governance. So our first question to Anne Grady, please. How can you tell us how the European Commission is strengthening the cultural heritage resilience for climate change? Would please tell us more about that and the related methodology that you're using. Please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And I assume that you can hear and see me, so thank you. And thank you to the European thank you. And thank you to the European Space Agency for this opportunity to present at this very important and indeed really timely event, because cultural heritage and climate change is significant, and there's the impact of climate change on cultural heritage. And I have a presentation which outlines the importance and what the EU Commission is doing to address this. So if I may share, will I share my presentation now?
Yes, please share, okay. And we hear you well.
Okay, it's always good to start with the quotation, and this is a very, very apt quotation. It's 14 years ago, and it says the time to act is now. So going back to Marco's question, what is the Commission doing about cultural heritage and climate change? Indeed, it goes back to 2004 with the Noah's Ark project. But what I'm going to talk about today is an overview of the Council Work Plan for Culture. What is an OMC, an open method of coordination? The rationale behind the OMC, the background, our role, our working approach, the results, and a timeline. So I mentioned the Noah's Ark project going back to 2004, but also it's quite significant to say that under the Juncker Commission, that climate change was one of the top 10 priorities. And indeed, under the Ursula von der Leyen Commission, it still is a priority, and even more so with the European Green Deal, which strives to make Europe the first climate neutral continent. So the Council Work Plan for Culture has 6 priorities, and the one I'm going to focus on is sustainability in cultural heritage. An open method of coordination working group, an OMC group, what is it? It's actually a form of soft law. It doesn't result in any kind of legislative measures, and it provides a framework for cooperation between the EU countries. And the nominated experts are appointed by the different ministries of culture, the cultural institutions, research agencies and bodies, and will meet 6 times over 18 months. And what do? We exchange good practice, we produce policy manuals, toolkits, and we widely share this throughout the EU. We work towards an agreed mandate, and the mandate for this particular working group on cultural heritage and climate change was agreed last year under the German presidency. So the rationale behind this OMC group, of course, it refers to the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. And of particular relevance is the SDG on climate action. And experts are requested to identify and exchange good practices and innovative measures for the historical environment in relation to climate change. And of course, given where we are now, there's a focus on energy efficiency of historical buildings, because they're not your standard buildings. There's a very special concept around historical buildings. They have from the aesthetics, from legislation, and from guidelines. We'll also look at the design and transformation of the cultural landscape and the safety of heritage under extreme weather conditions. The other SDGs that are relevant to this particular group are SDG 11, which makes cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, resilient and sustainable. 11.4, which focuses on protecting and safeguarding the world's cultural and natural heritage. And of course 7, 14, 15 and 17. The background to the mandate, of course, the European Year of Cultural Heritage, which was very, very successful in 2018, the new European Agenda for Culture, and the European Framework for Action on Cultural Heritage, which is actually the legacy of the European Year of Cultural Heritage and has over 60 actions following on from the year. I've mentioned the SDGs and the European Green Deal, the Paris Agreement, but we also have the Intergovernment Panel on Climate Change, the Sendai Framework, and the Council conclusions on risk management, which were agreed under the Croatian presidency during the first half of last year. The role of this OMC group, its objective, of course, it's to identify good practices and innovative measures for the protection of cultural heritage. And this includes both tangible and intangible, because we often find that intangible heritage is overlooked. This is the heritage where we have festivals, tradition, customs and practices. And how are they, both the tangible and intangible, how are they impacted by climate change? We'll also look at the current and emerging threats and impacts of climate change on cultural heritage. And this is, as I said at the beginning, a very, very timely workshop. We're going to look at cultural landscapes, appropriate adaptation and mitigation measures, identify the potential risks and focus on building resilience of cultural heritage assets in the face of a changing environment while avoiding maladaptation. And then this group has a two-pronged approach. So we're looking at the impact of climate change on cultural heritage. And on the other side, we're looking at what cultural heritage can do to mitigate and combat climate heritage. And this itself is a two-way process. So we can learn from cultural heritage how, over the last 1,000, 2,000 years, what cultural heritage can offer in relation to climate change. And also what can the actual, say, museums, libraries, archives, heritage sites, what can they actually do to mitigate carbon emissions? So this group will prepare a report, and in that report we're going to map public policies, analyse best practices and case studies and policy recommendations, with the specific task of national, regional and local policies, exchanging information. We have a number of experts, so we're going to swap ideas, exchange information. It's a really good platform to do that. Look at threats and impacts, look at strategies and measures, how to avoid or reduce climate impact on cultural heritage, and of course the early warning systems by the Paris Agreement and the Sendai Framework. We'll exchange on the response of cultural heritage sites and institutions and communities, as I said earlier, to mitigate the impacts of climate change on cultural heritage. And of course, this is all under the umbrella of the European Green Deal. The working approach is an integrated approach to heritage management. We'll focus on cultural heritage and cultural landscapes, and we have complementarities and synergies with other relative initiatives. And this is a very, very good, this actual workshop is a very good example of that, of the synergies. We're also working with the two other OMC groups. We are exchanging information, one on the cultural dimension of sustainable development, and the other on high quality architecture and built environment, and that's the Baukultur, which is also focusing on the new European Bauhaus. And we have support from the European Expert Network on Culture. So we now have, so far, 23 member states, and I've listed them there. And when I say so far, actually the Czech Republic just joined yesterday. We've only had one meeting, so we've had a kick-off meeting, which was in the middle of January, and our second meeting, which we're busy preparing for, is on the 23rd and 24th of March, and then we have a third meeting in June, and we've not planned the next remaining 3 meetings yet. So what's going to happen as a part of the report? We're going to prepare an inventory looking at the projects that's already been conducted under Horizon 20 and also the Mari Slodovska Curim actions. We'll look at EU activities such as the study on safeguarding heritage from disasters and other relevant reports. And I'm going to come back and touch on that study at the end of my presentation. We're going to make proposals for future research and recommendations on how to be prepared, capacity building, this exchange of information, knowledge and expertise, and disaster risk reduction. And we're going to provide guidance on contribution of cultural heritage to the reduction of CO2 emissions. A very, very ambitious mandate. So what will happen to the report? Well, it'll lead to awareness raising, capacity building, and the recommendations will be disseminated and shared at both European and national level. And this gives you an idea of the timeline. We commence meeting under the Portuguese presidency, then we have the Slovenian presidency for the second half of the year, the French presidency beginning of next year, and our report should be finalised during the Czech Republic presidency at the latter part of 2022. So as I said, I was going to touch on the safeguarding cultural heritage from natural and man-made disasters. This report was formulated during the European Year of Cultural Heritage in 2018, and it presents a comprehensive overview of what was happening, the existing knowledge on safeguarding cultural heritage from the impact of natural and threats caused by human action. And it maps existing strategies and tools for disaster risk management in the member states and provides evidence-based recommendations. And I provided a link to that report and invite you to, my presentation will be shared afterwards, and invite you to have a look at the report. I've also provided links to other documents and reports that I've mentioned already, such as our Work Plan for Culture, the new European Agenda for Culture, the Framework for Action, the European Year, the Green Deal, and also of significance to our group is Copernicus. And here are some more links, which I'm sure you're already very familiar with. So thank you very much for this opportunity. I think it's a really, really good platform for us to exchange ideas and also to work in a synergistic manner. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Grady. Your presentation is very insightful and is a very good start for the day.
Thank you.
I was particularly pleased to see you indicating the various actions, including the use of Galileo data and most of our Copernicus that we work together within ESA and the European Union. And me personally, as a lawyer of ESA, I was particularly pleased by your noting that the method of coordination for cultural action and practices is what you define a method of soft law.
Yeah.
This is exactly what we do in space activities worldwide, and ESA is an actor of that. We define common actions in coordination worldwide with many space agencies around the world, using the method that we call soft law to create a new law and new regulations, soft regulation or soft practices, let's say, customary practice, we call it, for space activities. So I'm pleased to see that the method spreads around in different areas, space, culture, and protecting the heritage. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, and thank you again for the opportunity. Thank you. And I'm looking forward to the rest of the day, and well done to the European Space Agency. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure I will have questions later for you.
Okay, yeah.
Please hold on as I move to the next panelist today, and that is Einar Bjorgo. Einar Bjorgo is the director of the Division for Satellite Analysis and Applied Research at the United Nations Institute for Training and Research, UNITAR. In that capacity, he oversees the Operational Satellite Application Program, UNOSAT, that we at ESA know well, and the strategic implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Since 1999, he holds a PhD in geophysics from the University of Bergen, Norway, with focus on humanitarian applications of very high resolution satellite imagery. He also has a Master of Science in Meteorology, Climate Science, and a Bachelor in Mechanical Engineering from the University of UC San Diego. And Bjorgo joined the UN Commissioner for Refugee in 1999, working on integrating new technological solutions into its operations, with special focus on the use of satellite imagery. In 2002, he joined UNOSAT, and this capacity ensures satellite image analysis is made in a timely available in support of humanitarian relief, sustainable development, environment, climate services, peace, security, human rights, and international law. All this is what the Sustainable Development Goals call for. So through UNOSAT knowledge transfer mechanism, he also supports beneficiaries from UN member states, regional organization, sister agency, NGO with training and capacity development of geospatial technology. As of January 2018, he also oversees UNITAR strategic implementation of the 2030 Agenda with a focus on integrated policy development. And he is part of the Scientific Advisory Board at the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court. Here and knowledge from Dr. Bjorgo. So my first opening question to him, Dr. Bjorgo, is noting that UNITAR and UNOSAT have capacity in combining the best in discovery and disseminating with the latest trends in image processing for cultural heritage. Can you please tell us more about current cultural heritage applications? The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Marco. I really appreciate being invited to this event. As you may know, I'm sure you know, but many of the participants, UNOSAT was actually started back in 2001 through a project financed by the European Space Agency and the French space agencies. So 20 years on, we are very happy to be able to still explore together how space can be used for various aspects towards sustainable development. Actually, I think your question will be answered through my presentation. So if it's okay, I will just go ahead and share my screen.
Please do, we hear you.
Okay, thank you. Very quick introduction to UNOSAT. We are a program within the Division for Satellite Analysis and Applied Research at the UN Institute for Training and Research, based in Geneva, Switzerland. We have been operational back since 2001, so we're 20 years this year, and we're actually funded by ESA and the French Space Agency. So a nice success story for ESA as well. We are fully dedicated to satellite imagery analysis and capacity development on these technologies, primarily to member states, as well as service function to UN sister agencies and various NGOs. We are also very fortunate because we have our IT infrastructure hosted at CERN here in Geneva, which is really useful for us in terms of the quite heavy data-intensive imagery that we're working on. What is also nice with this type of technology and also the way that UNITAR has been organized is that we have division for peace, planet, people, and prosperity. But of course, the little satellite you see in the lower right window is basically indicating that this technology is very cross-cutting. So that is one aspect I think it's very important. And of course, cultural heritage is also in many senses cross-cutting in itself. Very quickly, yes, we're based in Geneva, but we also have offices in Nairobi, in Bangkok, and in New York. And we're also, through a project financed by the UK Space Agency called Common Sensing, we have colleagues based with the governments of Fiji, Vanuatu, and the Solomon Islands. One of the most important things, I think, in using space for cultural heritage is the issue of partnerships. We are very fortunate. We've had an MOU with UNESCO for several years now. We've done many great things together, I believe. But we also work with other entities, both ICONEM, the German Ecological Institute, and other entities. So this is for us extremely important because we have our expertise in satellite imagery analysis, but being able to add value to that analysis is extremely important. And that we can only do by collaborating with the real experts. So for us, we have different service line within UNOSAT. The cultural heritage work for partly within what we call human rights mapping in terms of conflict situations. Here we are working also, as I said, with UNESCO and other entities like the International Criminal Court in seeing how space technology, and in this case also the cultural heritage angle, is important when it comes to human rights. But we also work in other domains, such as, for example, when there are natural disasters or disaster situations, then we can also use the same technology to look at potential impacts, for example, on natural heritage sites, as well as other heritage sites that are affected by natural disasters. We can also use it, of course, more in a development context to make sure that this type of sites stay protected. This example that you see here is from the Temple of Bel in Palmyra in Syria. I got a phone call, I think it was on the 30th of August 2015 from UNESCO. They had heard rumors that the Temple of Bel had been destroyed by ISIS, and we were able to quickly get an image taken over the area. So the next day, we already had that image downloaded and analyzed. What was, of course, very sad was that the reports were actually right. The temple had been really, really damaged and destroyed. So what we learned a bit from that situation as well is that once you're able to provide this information very timely, it has a huge impact, because this analysis immediately, in 20 minutes after we had posted it on our Twitter, and of course also informed UNESCO about it first, that feed went to all the main news channels. So we saw the importance of and the interest in the protection of cultural heritage, and space can really help in that sense with the extreme usefulness of the timely information that space is bringing. I mentioned also the humanitarian rapid mapping that we have. This is one of the longest standing services that we have done. We also here work very closely with the International Charter of Space and Major Disaster, which ESA is one of the funding members of, and we are benefiting a lot from the charter. So thanks to this, we are able to get imagery of areas affected It can be tropical cyclones, it can be flooding, it can be earthquakes, it can be landslides, etc. So what we are doing is that we are then able to program the satellites to take urgent imagery over the affected areas, and we're able to quite fast do our satellite imagery analysis. We do reports and data, and we are also doing web maps. Interesting also is the UN-assigned crowdsourcing app that we are also increasingly benefiting from, where volunteers can take photos, and it's being automatically uploaded to our CERN servers, and for us to get the photos from the ground as well. So one example of that is, for example, tropical cyclones. We have a cyclone passing over Vanuatu about a year ago. And what we saw was that, fortunately, in this case, we got information from our contacts in the government. They wanted us to check out some of the sites are in their cultural heritage list. And fortunately, in this case, it was good news. The site was not damaged, and we could use imagery to look at to verify that. But we've also, as I mentioned, looked at many other examples. Of course, way back since 2011, we've been involved in the Syria conflict, but we have also been working in Iraq. We're also continuously working in Yemen, and also in Nepal. So this is one report that we did back in 2015. What we did in the year 2015 when we signed the MOU with UNESCO. 3/4 of what we did was based on conflict situations, and also, of course, the Nepal earthquake, which was quite disastrous. And here also we had great help, as I mentioned, from the UN-assigned app. We had volunteers taking lots of photos from Nepal and uploading them onto our website. So that was really, really interesting, I think. I mentioned also in conflict situations. This is a report we did together with UNESCO, the state of cultural heritage in the ancient city of Aleppo. So that was following 5 years of conflicts. And so what we are able to do is to, of course, have the geographic information. We have the satellite images that we analyze. We do the damage assessment, but we also have other information that we get from the governments and from UNESCO. And together, I think what is interesting is that it's by combining all this information that you're able to do quite interesting analysis. So if you look at these two, we are able to, of course, as UNOSAT, we can do quite a detailed damage assessment. Has the site been completely destroyed? Is it severely damaged, moderate damage, or possibly damaged? But what is interesting, I think, in this regard was that we were able to connect with the more experts in archaeology and history, and we could together, or taking their input, we could also look at what is the critical loss, what is severe loss, what is moderate loss, according to their definitions. So by combining these two, we are able to come up with quite interesting products that, of course, if you have a critical site completely destroyed, that would be the highest let's say damage value, and then down to site possibly damage or minimal loss, and then you can of course also have the various combinations of all these. We are also working with as I mentioned, with partners. We're working with ICONEM. They had done a very nice augmented reality of the ancient citadel in Aleppo. So that is one of the things that we are looking at in terms of innovation, and I think being able to present what is normally a 2D map in 3 dimensions has quite a bit of an impact. And of course, you can add damage assessment as well to this type of technology, to this type of app. And for those who are not necessarily map readers, this type of features, I think it's quite interesting, and it does give you a full 3D view, and of course you can turn around, you can look at it from different angles, etc. So thanks to ICONEM and UNESCO also for partnering with us in that regards. So just to conclude, I think there are many opportunities we can have as a community in this, especially around partnerships that I mentioned, the importance of including archaeologists to add value to the remote analysis, and of course also integrate this into service lines for consistency. It's important that also at the national level that one is informed about that these capacities exist, so that we are able to really spread the word and be able to support national government and of course also UNESCO and other international organizations such as ICC. And the solutions do exist, so we have to make sure that we put them to use. I think some of the trends as well are important. Of course, there is already an increased awareness of space-based solutions in support of cultural heritage protection, which is great. But in terms of also improved technologies, we have now many satellite constellations. We have augmented reality, we have artificial intelligence, we have a much longer archive at our disposal as well. So all this is really great opportunities for us as a community to be able to support the protection of cultural heritage. And some of the challenges I would think would be, is the consistency in monitoring. Even though the opportunities are there, we have to make sure that they are informed, that they're mandated, and at the national level, the proper agencies are informed about what exists and how we can help them. And of course, these national entities sometimes may need support in terms of training and capacity development as well. So I think that is, one aspect. It is quite interesting and very useful. It's not just about the technical solutions. It's also a lot about awareness raising and training and capacity development. So with that, I would like to thank you so much for your attention, and thanks again to ESA for having invited me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Einar. Interesting conclusions. The next panelist that we have is Professor Andreas Georgopoulos. He's a board member and vice president of the International Council on Monument and Sites, ICOMOS. Dr. Andreas Georgopoulos is full professor of photogrammetry and director of the Lab of Photogrammetry at the School of Rural and Survey Engineering of NTUA. He holds a diploma of survey engineering and a master and PhD in photogrammetry from University College London. He has been teaching photogrammetry and documentation of monuments since 1980 at UCL and as visiting professor of KU Leuven and the University of Jiangnan. He has been vice head and head of the School of Rural and Surveying Engineering and member of the research committee of NTUA since 1999. He's a member of the executive board of the ISC of ICOMOS, Heritage Documentation, has served as Secretary General until 2014 and President until 2019, where currently is the Vice President. He has published approximately 250 scientific papers on 3D modeling of cultural heritage, photogrammetric automation, and digital contemporary techniques. So, Professor Georgopoulos, welcome with us this morning. And given your expertise, could you please tell us more about the ICOMOS involvement in the use of space-based technology and consequent policy challenges? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I hope I'm being heard, and I just hope I don't get interrupted by, the digital demons that haunt us for the last year. So if you allow me to share my my screen, my presentation.
Yes, please. We hear you well. And now we see a presentation coming up in a second. Yes, we see it. If you can blow it up, yes, we can see it.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction and for the invitation. What I will try to do in the next 10 minutes or so is to firstly introduce the organization that I represent, and secondly show you some examples of what we can do from space for taking care of cultural heritage. So I trust you see the presentation now already. Okay.
Perfectly.
So,
I am a board member of ICOMOS and the vice president of SIPA. SIPA is an international scientific committee of ICOMOS. As you probably know, ICOMOS is an offspring of UNESCO to take care of monuments. And SIPA is a hybrid committee between ICOMOS and ISPRS, the International Society for Photogrammetry and Remote Sensing, with the mandate to bring technology from ISPRS, that's photogrammetry, remote sensing, satellite technology, etc., to the conservation of monuments. So this presentation will focus on exactly those things. These are some facts about these two non-governmental and voluntary organizations. ICOMOS is a widespread and well-known, I think, organization spanning over 150 countries and having more than 10,000 members. SIPA is a smaller society, is a smaller committee, and works for the purpose that I just mentioned in my previous slide. So we do international symposia every 2 years. We publish a newsletter. We organize workshops and summer schools. That was before March last year. And we hope that from this autumn, we will continue to have our activities. So why recording cultural heritage, or how do we do that? We acquire data by any means. That's even using our hands or using instrumentations, that is special sensors that could be divided, categorized into main groups. That's passive sensors that record radiation that some other source sends to the objects, to cultural heritage in this case, and active sensors that is sensors that have their own radiation. They send their radiation to the object and they record what is emitted back from the object. As you probably know, or we all know, that there are a lot of sensors flying around the Earth, looking down the Earth and observing the Earth. So we try to exploit all these very interesting sensors for the benefit of cultural heritage. And with my exams, with the exams that I will show you, I will try to point out the importance of the satellite sensors for cultural heritage. So the idea is we record data from all these nice sensors. That's optical radiation, non-optical radiation, that's infrared or near infrared or hyperspectral, multispectral radiation, or radar, and LiDAR, that's laser from airborne sensors. And we also record intensity of emitted pulses or beams, that's somewhat differently. And we also record the travel time of the radiation from the sensor to the object and back. And this data is useless unless we process it and produce information, extract information from those recorded data. And information includes geometry, that's whereabouts, that's the location, and how big or what's the shape of the object, and also includes qualitative information, that's qualities of the object that has been recorded. That includes also the state of conservation. And since we have a repeated recording of this data, we can monitor the state of the objects and, in this case, of cultural heritage. We saw in Dr. Werner's presentation some pictures from Kathmandu. That was fortunately that he didn't have the same pictures that I have. So you can see on the lower left of the slide two successive images from space of Kathmandu, where before, that's on the left, and after the earthquake, and on the other side of the slide you can see the effect of the tsunami in the 2004 earthquake. You see before, it's on the upper image, and after is on the lower image. So we can actually have a recording every now and then. You know, satellites orbit the Earth, and they get data very frequently, so we can actually monitor, and this is very important when it comes to cultural heritage. What can be recorded from space sensors? Practically everything, but everything that can go through the atmosphere of the Earth, either once or twice. That's if you emit it, or if it's just recorded from the satellite sensors. And the interesting thing is that different objects on the Earth send different signatures, different spectral signatures, as they are called, to the sensors. And if the sensor is suitably sensitive, then we can record these differences, and we can understand a lot of things. We can process the data and get very, very interesting information out of it. How do we apply space sensors to cultural heritage? As you probably know, there are a lot of international conventions, agreements between the states of the world concerning cultural heritage, and I just mentioned two very important ones here. That's the Venice Charter, where recording of cultural heritage has been literally demanded before every intervention on cultural heritage. And there is also a more recent agreement, the Valletta Treaty, that suggested to the experts to use, if possible, non-destructive techniques for archaeological research. So don't destroy things. And as you probably know, excavation is a destructive process. And I will come back to that when I talk a little bit about archaeological prospection. So we have a multitude of satellite sensors at our disposal, very high resolution imaging from 30 centimeters to whatever you like. And we have infrared or thermal imaging, we have multispectral, hyperspectral imaging, we have laser scanners, that's also called LiDAR, light detection and ranging. We also have bathymetric LiDAR, and I will show you an example afterwards. And we also have radar imaging in available. So the applications for cultural heritage are spanning over a very wide spectrum. I think the most important applications are the recording of the state of the object, of the archaeological site or the monument, of monitoring it, and I will show you some examples, of managing cultural heritage, which is becoming all the more important nowadays, and also archaeological prospection, that is, discover archaeological sites without excavating anything. So this is what is meant by archaeological prospection. In the next slide, when it comes up, yes, this is an example of the processing of very high resolution imaging, and you see on the left and right on top two successive images over a period of 3 years, and this is in the Middle East, and you can see that, or you can read also the on the left of the slide, that in this 3-year period there was extreme looting in the area, and this could be established, this could be found out by suitable processing. So on the lower part of the image of the slide, you can see the ground truth that was found after the area could be visited again. So this is a nice example of what monitoring means for cultural heritage. If we go to the next slide, this is a very interesting application by one of our former Secretary General and Vice President of SIPA, that's Professor Domeus. This is an interesting application of using hyperspectral imaging and suitable processing on these recordings to discover archaeological finds underneath the soil. So you can see how this can be done from space. And in the next image, in the next slide, it takes some time. This is an assortment of applications of LiDAR, that's laser scanning, that's an active sensor that sends laser beams to the ground. This has the ability to penetrate the canopy, penetrate the vegetation, and you can see on the top image what can be found underneath the coverage of the vegetation. And on the lower part, on the right, you can see how bathymetric LiDAR can penetrate water, okay, until some depth, that's 20, 30 meters, that's the usual ability now. And you can see that there are some cultural heritage objects that were found by suitable processing. And I also remind you on something that was published several months ago, that by using LiDAR, there was a settlement which was not known up to then, uncovered in the Amazon area. And all that requires interdisciplinarity, that is all the specialists, all the technologies, and all the knowledge should collaborate for the benefit of cultural heritage. This is something that I consider it as very important. So I think I passed the limit of my time, so I apologize for that. But thank you very much for your patience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I'm sure we'll have questions for you in the later session, question and answers. So we'll move now directly to the next speaker. There we have Valerie Magar. Valerie, are you available now?
Yes, I can speak. Yes.
Okay, so Valerie Magar is a conservator and archaeologist. She holds a PhD in archaeology from the Université de Paris Sorbonne, and she worked for many years at a National Conservation Center at the National Institute of Anthropology and History in Mexico, where she specialized in archaeological conservation and history and theory of conservation. She was the head of the National Conservation Center from 2013 to 16, and she has widely published in the themes of archaeological conservation. She's the editor of Conversaciones, edited by Aina and Ikrom. So, Dr. Magar, can you please explain us the opportunities and challenges in the preservation and restoration of cultural property according to your experience, please?
Yes, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. There's works going around me, so I hope it will not be too disturbing with the background noise.
We see you and hear you well.
Thank you. seem to be having problems sharing my presentation, but hopefully it will start soon. Today seems to be the day of technical complications. We did all the testings and it was, there it goes, I hope. Okay, so
we see it.
Perfect,
yes, we
thank
see
you.
it.
So thank you very much, Mr. Ferrazzani, for the introduction. And I would like to thank the European Space Agency on behalf of our Director General, Dr. Weber Ndoro, for the invitation to participate in this panel. So for those who may not be familiar with ECROM, I have also included a few slides as my previous colleagues. So ECROM is an intergovernmental organization which was founded in 1956 and is currently composed of 137 member states, all of those you see in blue in the map. It has also a fairly broad mandate for a small organization, which is to promote the conservation of cultural heritage worldwide, both movable and immovable. And ECROM delivers its mandate essentially through 5 areas of activity, which are sharing information, fostering cooperation, training and capacity building, research and awareness. And probably the activity for which ECROM is best known in different countries is its capacity building programs and activities, all of which try to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. Some of the main programs which are relevant for today's topic and on the use of space technology are our First Aid and Resilience program, which aims at improving preparedness, enhancing cooperation and coordination, even among people outside the area of the field of cultural heritage, and also empowering communities to act in case of disasters. The other program is our World Heritage Leadership Program, where in collaboration with our partners, we're aiming at integrating conservation and management by linking nature, culture, and communities. And here, having adequate information is, of course, fundamental. And finally, we also have a series of courses which deal with sustainability for cultural heritage, where we look at innovations in the field and we try to transmit them to our mid-career participants who come to and attend these courses. Of particular interest in these courses is the development of cities and the role of historic centers, which are now at stake with urban growth. So conservation of cultural heritage is about the long term. We're looking into the duration over time, as it deals with maintaining a place, considering all of its values, considering its material aspects, and considering all the wider context it can have, including the natural setting in which we are all located, so that through conservation measures, these sites and these places can be enjoyed by our society. But it also aims at being transmitted into the future, so there the long duration is also important. As our previous colleague mentioned, it is by definition an interdisciplinary activity if it aims at producing sustainable results. Durability and stability are required for materials used to treat, exhibit, and store cultural heritage. And here we are often using technology and materials developed in other fields of research and science and applying it to cultural heritage. But also good and reliable information is fundamental to understand the site, to assess its condition, to monitor its state over time, and to be able to prioritize actions and communicate the strategies. And the data derived from space technology has been a growing field over the years, that has already been explained by some of the previous panelists today, in the field of cultural heritage protection and conservation. And we have seen the increased access and level of detail in remote sensing methods for archaeology, which allows not only the understanding of those sites that may be covered, as my colleague from ECOM has mentioned, but it's also incredibly important to explore and assess underlying conditions, for example, affecting the structural and stability of a building or in much more detail, for example, of a mural painting. We have also seen the collaboration with satellite imaging to assess and monitor the evolution of our landscapes, whether these are urban or rural, and particularly to assess urban growth, as it has been described by our previous speakers. And satellite information has also been a means to access areas of conflict, which was also mentioned, and identify, for example, illicit excavations and looting or illicit activities. At ICRAM, we have been particularly interested in the use of crowdsourcing and georeferenced information and data, particularly in the case of large-scale disasters, such as the image you see here from Nepal during the earthquake that was described by ESA's Director General in his introduction. And this type of information allows us to gather witnesses who can see the destruction in areas that have been affected by major disasters, and actually allowing us to plan and prioritize the different actions that need to be taken into account. And similar type of information has also been used during the current COVID-19 pandemic, where we have not always been able to go to places where such disasters occur, but still it has allowed us to provide advice and to be able to guide local agencies in the response to these types of phenomena. This was the case, for example, during the Amphan cyclone, which hit India last year. But as other panelists mentioned, probably our largest and most important challenge that we're facing today is linked to climate change and all of the effects that are already visible worldwide and which will intensify before actions can be taken to hopefully stop that. The most visible effects of these climate destabilization are the increased number of catastrophic events and disasters, and the increase also in their the effects that they have. And these include fires, storms, cyclones, and hurricanes, which we can see in the news nearly every month, as well as droughts and floods, and all the associated secondary effects. In addition to this very visible impacts and effects that are of catastrophic nature and that then lead to secondary impacts and threats, such as looting or other secondary fires after cyclone or after an earthquake. Something that is also of worry to us at ICRAM is slow and cumulative effects, which are affecting sites in a less visible manner, immediate, let's say, but which in the long term are quite worrying and can also be very have a large impact. And these include, for example, changes in the behavior of previously stable heritage sites, including structural damage, for example, by increased rainfall when the soil gets waterlogged and starts fluctuating due to that excess of water, which had never happened before. So previously stable buildings are now having structural problems. Or the same can be happening with areas that used to be permanently damp or wet, such as areas in the Maya forest, which now, due to many years of drought, of serious drought in the region, are having an effect on the materials which are drying and now are having also serious conservation problems. So with the various ICRAM programs and in collaboration with our partners, we are aiming at increasing the capacities for more integrated management and for approaches that can increase the resilience within our communities at heritage places. The image you can see on the screen now shows a simplified cycle for management and resilience, which includes starting at the top, assessing the site and its values and understanding what needs to be cared for, then planning and prioritizing various conservation and management activities, establishing preventive and mitigation measures when possible, and in case of a catastrophic event, undertaking recovery actions or just undertaking all the conservation and maintenance actions in the case of slow and cumulative hazards. And all of these need to be monitored, evaluated, and whenever needed, adaptation takes place. And where we use data that could come from space technology is at each and every of these steps. We need data to assess and monitor in the early steps of assessing and planning. We need data for early warning systems and for monitoring. We also need data to assess and plan for the recovery actions. And we've seen images in the previous presentation showing just how useful these images can be. And for monitoring in particular, which is usually our weakest point, understanding how our preventive mitigation measures or our recovery actions have actually benefited a site or affected a site, and whether these are the best ways to continue in the future. So these are extremely important. At each of these points, information is crucial. So we know we have the capacity and the technology to gather information, and such information is becoming more refined and more tuned every day. But I think what we need is to also focus to make sure we have the policies that will allow an increased and accessible use of such information at different levels. We need to be able to integrate the different sets of data, allowing overlays of information for different purposes and for different users, including heritage professionals, policymakers, the international organizations, also the local communities, the heritage professionals, but also linking with the territorial planners, with civil protection, for example, whenever they are doing things around a heritage site. We need to be coordinated and we need to be able to share information. And of course, for researchers, so that this type of information can continue, and for the academy in general, so that we have better information. And all of these users should be connected at the international and regional levels, but also at the national and local levels, so that it can permeate both the governance levels, usually at national or regional level, but then it can be downscaled to the level of each site, so that the site managers who are ultimately responsible for the sites can implement those policies and the practice that goes with it. This is one of the goals of our various programs, which I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, but also, for example, the collaboration that we are having with the World Heritage Center as one of its advisory bodies for the World Heritage Convention on updating the policy for climate change. And we are facing pressing and increasing threats to our heritage, and ICCROM, with its partners, will continue to strive to promote integrated approaches to heritage conservation, fostering collaboration between sectors, fostering interdisciplinary coordination as well. And we certainly look forward to the discussions in the panel today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Valerie Magar. And this is the plenty of ideas here. I thank you for this. I would just do a very quick tour de table among the panelists and ask them to summarize in only one phrase from each of you in the same order, because I was very much impressed by the different point of view and different policy perspective. It's a very rich contribution from all of you. In one phrase, can each of you tell me if you have seen today one opportunity, one challenge for cultural heritage sector? What have you taken from today's conversation? I would like to start back with Grady, please.
Right, and thank you very much for the interesting presentations. I know from my side, it's reinforced the idea of that we should work together and have a synergistic approach, and there's lots of information that we can share and exchange. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I will continue with to the tab with Professor Georgopoulos in one or two phrases. What is your takeaway today about opportunities?
Thank you very much. It was obvious that cultural heritage has only benefits to gain from space technology. And as far as the organizations that I represent, that's ICOMOS and its international scientific committees, I think that the interaction with European Space Agency and closer cooperation for the benefit of exploiting the technology and driving the cart a little bit further for the conservation of cultural heritage would be beneficial for both parts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. So the next speaker, Valerie, is about the connection with cultural protection, cultural values, and climate change. I think that we at ESA care a lot, and that's one, of course, objective of our downstream gateway activities. So you mentioned that, Valerie, about the various connection and interactions. Just a comment, please.
Well, I would just share what was mentioned by the previous panels, just thanking the organizers for this possibility to exchange information. And I think with the sense of urgency, with many of the threats to cultural heritage, joining efforts is the answer. So we really look forward to, I've also been writing down possibilities of collaboration, and I really look forward to that, an enhanced collaboration in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're about to close. I will take only one additional question from the public, because we are 1 minute to go. And this is a question regarding the Apollo 11 landing site that we saw on the screen. The question is about is cultural and inspirational impact globally, is it going to be granted common heritage status of humankind and protected as a heritage site? This is I know it's a current debate worldwide. And I have to say, not only the Apollo 11 site is seen and photographed a lot, but from the space community, I can tell you it's not only one. We have more than 50 human artifacts on the moon by Russian, American, and even recently Chinese missions. So it's a matter of not just one site. Of course, that's one the most known one. And the question is to a colleague from UNESCO, if we want to care to answer, what is UNESCO's view on the topic of human artifacts on the moon?
Thank you very much for that question. It could not go under the World Heritage Convention. So first of all, you don't have a state party which could nominate that site, because the moon is not covered by any of the countries currently having ratified the World Heritage Convention. And secondly, the World Heritage Convention protects sites on the Earth's surface. So the moon doesn't count under that. But I could imagine that there could be other mechanisms to protect this heritage, because it's certainly a very relevant heritage which deserves protection. We have, for example, for Antarctica, we have an agreement, you know, there could be similar agreements to protect the heritage in space. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And I can tell you as a conclusion that being a lawyer of ESA, we in the space law community are already minding about this, because the moon, like other bodies, have a specific legal regime for outer space. He said 50 more human artifacts on the moon and possibly on other planets in the future. And that's something which is in the so-called soft law and the future hard development of space law, exactly to designate by all parties to the Outer Space Treaty, which is virtually an universal commitment of all, from the Earth to outer space. So with this news, I'd like to close the panel and thank all the panelists. It's been very insightful and I learned a lot, and that already makes a good day for me. And I will give back the word to our organizer, Donatella, please.
Thank you very much, Marco. Thank you to all the panelists for this rich panel. I learned a lot as well. And my takeaway is that there is a clear potential of enhancing the already established connection and work together It's full in line with our mandate and our willingness to care and to support the cultural heritage ecosystem. So we will be for sure in touch with you in the following weeks, because it's our, as Marco said, is our mandate. Now we can conclude the first session. We are going to have half an hour break, and we can reconvene at 11:30 for another very rich session on industry. The second panel will be users and stakeholders, innovative application and services in the field of cultural heritage, and it will be moderated by Geraldine Naja. See you in half an hour, and thank you again to all the participants and to all the speakers for this session. See you later.